We had time. I stay right there. That is a great song. Well, good morning to all of you. Special good morning to you if you're tuning in and online. We appreciate you joining us this morning, whether you're in person or online. Before I get started with our conversation today, I want to apologize, or I have to apologize to some of you. Many of you know that yesterday in the, this local area, we had some pretty heavy storms that took place in the area yesterday. Well, one of the storms that we had actually damaged some of our technical and electrical and production equipment in this building. And so some of you may be experiencing, you can notice technical difficulties that we're having from the sanctuary that you're viewing the service from. So we apologize to you in advance for that. There was, the team came through yesterday to survey everything to see what happened as a result of the storm. And they said when they came inside, they seen smoke coming from the production booth. So while we were apologizing for the technical difficulties, we're certainly thankful to God, because it could have been a lot worse. And so no one got hurt. There wasn't any major fire. So we thank God. We pray that by this time next week, hopefully everything will be back up to normal. All right, well, some of you, if you're anything like me, you know what it's like to go through a day. You know, you've been at work all day. You've been having to deal with the kids, school, or whatever it is. And by the end of the day, you just feel drained. You just feel physically drained. You're emotionally drained, spiritually drained, you're mentally drained. You're just all around the board, just drained. You don't want to deal with anybody. You can't wait to get into bed and go to sleep. Or, if you work at night and you have to sleep during the daytime, you can't wait to, get home so that you can get into bed. And it's somehow, I don't know if it's miraculously or just a process, by the next morning, it feels like you have another, another boost of life, right? It's like you have more energy, you have more of the internal fortitude that's required to handle your tasks that you have before you for that day. You have more patience, and, now you're just ready for the day that's at hand. And as soon as you walk out the door, though, the process starts all over again. Because you get in the car, and then you hit some traffic, and something, you start to get drained slowly again. And then you get to work, and you have a difficult task at work, and that begins to drain you. Then the kids' school calls, and that begins to drain the life out of you. And then, you got to go into a boring meeting or into a boring class. And then that begins to drain you. And then you look at your bank account, and God, we got to put 3 and 4 holes in it at that one. That just takes everything out of you, right? And, all these things that you go through your day just drains you. I mean, just different things that happens, and it's just draining. And, while all that stuff is draining, I believe that the most draining thing that you can encounter in any 24-hour period of time is when you have to deal with someone who is frustrating, difficult, annoying. When you have to just deal with someone that gets on your nerves. When you have to deal with a person that gets on your nerves, it just takes the life out of you, I mean, it takes everything out of you. When you have to encounter that person who, and it's not that they're trying to necessarily get on your nerves, it's just that their personality doesn't mesh well with your personality, right? When they, if you work with somebody that's always making you jump through unnecessary hoops to get things done, you got that person that's in your family, and every time you see them, and an argument always starts. They always got something to say. And when you encounter people like that, it drains everything out of you. And it's 3 o'clock. You don't even make it to the night before you're completely drained by dealing with difficult, frustrating, irritating people. We say things like this when it comes to someone who we have to deal with that's a little difficult at times. We say, they are getting on my last nerves. They're getting on my nerves. And the thing about dealing with people that get on your nerves is the way you respond to it, right? Because, when they do it, it makes you frustrated, it makes you irritated, it makes you mad. But your response to difficult people makes all the difference, doesn't it? And typically, if we was all be honest, as I know we're all here together, we don't respond to difficult people very well, do we? We don't respond to difficult people at all. We have sometimes bad things to say, nice things to say. And the reason why I know this message is so important, this series that we're doing is so important to each and every single one of us, is because I know that each and every single one of us deals with a difficult person. And if you're not dealing with a difficult person, you're counseling one of your friends who are dealing with a difficult person, right? In fact, this is what I want to do. We're going to do something together now. I want everyone to take out their cell phones. If you have your cell phone here with you, take your cell phone out. If you're watching online, you can take your cell phone out too. Or I'm going to give you another option to do this activity if you're watching online. You take out your cell phones, and I want to do a poll just in this room. Since we all deal with difficult people, I want to see in this service who is the person or the category of people that are most difficult for us to deal with, that get on our nerves most often, let's just say, right? And so I'm going to put some categories on the screen, right? And what I want you to do, I want you to text one of these categories. You'll have a word that you can text to this number. The number is 22333. Now, if, you're wondering, you're probably like, if I'm going to get charged for this, is this like our secret way of getting offering? There is no charge for it. This is only your normal. If you got text messaging set up on your phone, this is your normal text messaging rate to apply, all right? So here it is. So go ahead and put it on the screen. This is what I want you to do. Who gets on your nerves the most out of these categories, all right? If it's your parents, type the word parent. Text the word parent. Only choose one. Text the word parent. Dad, y'all already started. All right, only text the word parent to 22333. If it's your spouse or significant other, only text the word mate. Wow. See, we're honest. Only text the word mate to 2233. If it's your children, only text the word child to 223. If it's a coworker or a boss, text the word coworker or boss. If it's a friend or an acquaintance, text the word friend. And if you have a baby daddy or baby mama, just text the word drama to 22333. And I want to come back to it in a moment. Wow, everyone, mate, this is the service. Let's just change this message to marriage counseling. All right, so we're going to come back to this in a minute. And we're going to see, I want to see out of this service, who gets on people's nerves the most at this service. We'll come back to it, all right? Keep texting in, or if you're online, you can go to the URL and go to the URL there. As I said, when it comes to dealing with difficult people, and we're going to be talking about this for the next several weeks, our response is what's most critical. And we typically respond in one of four ways, right? Either we respond by being frustrated and irritating and like cursing them out or telling them about themselves, right? Y'all know how it is. You at work and you walk down the hall, you see somebody in the hallway and they, cursing somebody else out. And I will repeat their conversation, but we're in church. And so, they're just giving them a piece of their mind, right? And you know how it is. Someone irritates us or frustrates us. In our minds, we thinking, you know what? I got to make them know. I got to let them know how much whatever they said has offended me. I want to leave the same look that they left on my face on their face, right? And so we telling them about themselves, and we're frustrated, and we yelling at them, and we cursing them out, and we're doing all these crazy things, right? Okay, well, maybe you don't respond that way, because you think to yourself, okay, if I respond that way, I know God wouldn't be pleased with that, right? So maybe you do something different. Maybe the way that you respond is you try to build alliances, right? This is what you do. So, if it's someone in your family, right? And maybe it's a brother or a sister that made you mad. You go into your other sibling's room and you close the door and you say, let me tell you about your girl, right? Right? You're calling your mom on the phone. Let me tell you about your son, right? And you do this thing. If you're at work and somebody made you mad, you sneak into the office or you go in the cubicle next to you and you whispering real low and say, you know your girlfriend. You're trying to build alliances, right? And you say things like, don't you hate when they do that to you too? And you're like, how did I get into this, right? But you want them on your side, right? You want them to see things the way you, because this person has just irritated you. Maybe you don't do that because you realize that if I do that, then that's kind of gossiping, so I can't do that. So maybe your thing is you retreat, right? You say, you know what? I don't want to deal with that. So I'm just going to stay as far away from that person as possible so I don't have to deal with them. So if that person's a family member, we stop going to the family events, right? If the person is at church, we stop coming to church. In fact, some of you watching online right now because you don't want to run the risk of bumping into somebody, right? And when we go to another church, We do whatever we do whatever it takes to run from the person. Or, if the person's at work, we quit and find another job. Some of you been at your job 2 weeks and you're already sending out resumes and stuff because you don't want to do them. If it's a person that you're in a relationship with, what do? You get out of the relationship. And now this is marriage like 4, so, all right, I'm sorry. I know that's not all your fault. Okay, so, and so, but you do whatever it takes to run from a person that annoys you, that gets on your nerves. Well, here's the problem with that. If we use that as our foolproof response, we'll be running for the rest of our lives. Because there's always going to be somebody that personality doesn't mesh well with ours. There's always going to be somebody that's going to get on our nerves, that's going to do something or say something, or come at us the wrong way, and what happens. So maybe you decide, you say, I don't do any of that. Maybe your thing is this: you just don't do nothing at all. You just deal with it. Okay, I got it. Just going to deal with it. So you don't say nothing. You just internalize everything, right? You just kind of, you just shake your head and say, you give them your little sarcastic smiles and stuff. You do that type of thing. And in your mind, you're going to continue dealing with it because you're just praying and hoping that eventually they'll change. I'm just going to I ain't going to say nothing. I'm just going to pray. I'm just going to pray, Lord, you know them. You can fix them. And we just praying and hoping that eventually something clicks in their minds and they stop doing whatever it is that frustrates us, right? Now, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with praying for people. We should. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with hoping that a person would change one day. They should. We should hope the best for people, right? But here's the problem. Whenever we say, you know what, I'll just deal with this until they change, we put our peace and our happiness and our joy under the control of someone that we have no control over. And now we'll be hanging on a limb for an infinite amount of time, just waiting that, eventually they're going to get it together. Eventually they're going to realize how much this hurts me. Eventually they're going to realize how much this frustrates me. And so we just in our minds, we're just waiting it out. And we'll just keep waiting and waiting and waiting. And my question to you is this: why give someone that much control over your life? While you may not be able to fix them or him or her or they, you can fix one person. That's me. That's I. Numero uno, right? We can work on ourselves in the process. In fact, I'm going to give you some techniques throughout this series that's going to really help you deal with people in your life that frustrate you, that get on your nerves, all people. Things that I think will be very effective if you apply them. But here's the thing. Any of the techniques I give you, any of the other 3 things that I'll give you in this series, they won't work unless you get what I'm going to talk to you today about right. If you don't get this thing right, then you can just count, all the rest of the stuff will be just good practices. But we got to start here. And here's where here is, right? Everything begins and ends with our attitude when we approach the people that are difficult to deal with. Everything begins and ends with our attitude. Our attitude makes all the difference. In fact, this is what typically happens when someone frustrates us. We take on this attitude where we begin to say things like, you know what? I ain't got to deal with this. You know what? I'm too grown to be having to have to deal with this type of stuff. You know what? I've been working at this job way too long to have to put up with your mess. You know what? I've been way too good to you to have to deal with your mouth. You know what? I am too good of a person to have to put up with the likes of you. You know what? If you wasn't my family, I'd be living somewhere else because I'm just too good for this type of lifestyle. And we start to slowly take on this prideful attitude that, you know what, we're too good to be treated this way. We've done too much right. We've paid our dues after all. You know what? As long as I done known the pastor at that church, what you mean you're not going to let me in the main sanctuary, right? It's like, it's this attitude of entitlement that someone owes us something. That people can't have a bad day around us because after all, it's us. It's me. And we begin to have this prideful attitude. And guess what? Whenever this prideful attitude begins to rise in our spirit, we respond that way. Isn't that how it usually goes down? They must don't know who I am. But I'm about to show them. I'm about to let them know, right? They must don't know who they messing with. If they only knew. They must don't recognize that I'm still big enough to break my foot in. All right. This is what we have to put them in their place. We have to bring them to the understanding of who we are. You see how this thing works? This prideful attitude comes into play. And we would think that putting them in their place or bringing them to a better understanding of who we are or who we're not or whatever the case may be, that it would diffuse the situation. But if we was all being honest, it only exasperates things. It only makes things more frustrating. It only makes the situation more tense. You know, now what happens? We go to work and there's this tension there. Now we can't stand to be in the same presence with the person. Now we're arguing all the time and we don't speak to each other. And, you know, we always got little slick stuff to say. Now we're always out to try to get the person fired. And it's just crazy stuff because we thought that putting them in their place will resolve the situation. If you're into boxing, a boxer that has a good trainer, the trainer will say things to that boxer before the boxer has to go into a fight that will get that boxer to perform at his best. It'll get his adrenaline pumping, get him hyped up, get him ready. They begin to say things to the boxer like this. You know what, man? You the best. You the best that ever did it. Ain't nobody in this world that can beat you. This dude you about to fight, he ain't got nothing on you. He can't keep up with you. He can't keep up with your right, your left. He can't keep up with your swings. You too fast for him. You too strong for him. Man, you know what? I should be bowing down to you because you the man, right? This is what they say to him. You are the man. And they start thinking, the boss is like, yeah, I guess I am the man. All right. And the trainer's like, yeah, you the man. Say your name. He's like, I'm James. Now say it louder. I'm James. And say it proud. I'm James. You know, so the boss gets some hype, right? So that he can go in and fight. Now, if that boxer begin to say things if the trainer begin to say things to the boxer that will humble him, he probably lose his job. The trainer say things like, you know you can't beat him, right? You know you really ain't all that. You know we probably should postpone this match until you can get your weight up, and then maybe you have a chance. But right now, you ain't got a chance. I don't even know why I'm here. I don't know why you here. I don't know why we trying. Right? Hey, man, you know what? Don't even worry about putting them gloves on. You ain't need it. You ain't going to need it. You're going to be out quick. You know, he'll probably lose his job. He started saying things like this. You know what? I'm telling you like this. I don't even know why they allowed you to be on the ticket. You know, stuff like that. That doesn't motivate him to fight. That motivates him to, you know, say, all right, it's not even worth it. It's not worth fighting. They don't say things to the boxer like, you know, this dude's going to chew your head off. No, I don't want to fight now. I don't believe in myself. Here's the thing. Because a humble attitude diffuses fights. But a prideful attitude, that's why you and I need to understand that when it comes to dealing with difficult people, the first thing we got to do is we got to have a humble attitude. Because a humble attitude precedes an appropriate response. A humble attitude precedes an appropriate response. If you want to respond appropriately, because that's the thing we all want to know. How do I deal with difficult people, right? If I want to have an appropriate response to someone who's difficult, to someone who's annoying me, that's getting on my nerves, that's frustrating me, I got to humble my attitude. Now, I know what you're probably thinking, because I'm, kind of thinking the same thing too, right? Is I'm not the one with the problem. Why do I got to humble myself? I'm not the one that's annoying me. They're annoying me. They should humble themselves. I'm not the one that's going around getting on people's nerves. They are. They need to humble themselves. Maybe I should give this tape to them so that they can learn to be humble around me. Maybe if they got their minds right, then everything will be okay. I'm straight. I'm cool. But you're not. Because you're the one that goes home at night empty, frustrated. They do the dirt, but you carry the weight. Because here's the thing. If you take that approach that they should humble themselves and there's nothing for me to do, once again, we put the keys to our joy, our happiness in their hands, and now they're driving again. Because after all, you can't change whether or not they'll ever be humble. You can't do that. But what you can do is focus on yourself. I like the way Paul talks about this idea in Romans chapter 12. In Romans chapter 12, he's giving some instructions to the Christians that live in the city of Rome. And he gives this major theme on this idea that kind of sets everything else that he talks about up. In verse 3, he says this, "For by the grace given me, I say to every one of you, do not think of yourself more highly than you ought, but rather think of yourself with sober judgment in accordance with the faith God has distributed to each of you." In other words, Paul is saying, you know what? Don't think you're all that. Don't think that the way you act, the way you talk, the way you read, the way you write, the things, places you go, the things you do, the way you organize your life is the only and best way. Don't think you have it all together. You need to approach your own lifestyle with sober judgment. Sober judgment is this. It's saying, you know what? I don't need to put myself on a pedestal. You know, we begin to put ourselves, the way I do it is the best way. It's best for me. So everybody in my world should accommodate to me. We don't say this, but it's an unconscious thought. So sober judgment says, you know what? I'm not going to put myself up here with this. I'm not crazy. I'm going to consider myself that I'm a real person. I have flaws. I do things wrong. I get on people's nerves sometimes. I act up sometimes. I'm unloving at times. I lie at times. I cheat at times. I'm forgetful at times. I do wrong too. I'm not perfect. So Paul begins to give some other advice later in the passage. Starting in verse 14, this is what he says. Because he says, you know, you got to have a humble attitude. So when he begins to talk about how to deal with people that's difficult or enemies, whatever, it's coming from this mindset of a humble attitude. He says this, these are the actions. Bless those who persecute you. That doesn't make sense. Bless and do not curse. Rejoice with those who rejoice. Mourn with those who mourn. Live in harmony with one another. Do not be proud, but be willing to associate with people of low position. Do not be conceited. Do not repay evil for evil. Be careful to do what is right in the eyes of everyone. And here's verse 18. This is the critical part. If it is possible, as far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone. As far as it depends on you. In other words, as far as you have control of the situation, which is your actions. Pastor Jeff used to say, my response is my responsibility. You know, as far as it depends on you, try to pursue peace with everyone. You see, in order to do some of the actions that Paul talks about, you know, bless those who persecute you, you got to be humble. To not, you know, do the whole eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth thing, you got to be humble. To be able to rejoice about blessings that people receive when you didn't receive anything, to rejoice with them, it requires humility. To be able to mourn with someone else when it's not your loss, it requires humility. And if you're not going to repay evil for evil, if you're going to do what's right in the sight of God, it's going to require a humble attitude. You got to be humble. If you're going to pursue peace with everyone, you're going to have to be humble. You're going to have to be able to say, you know what? It's not always what's best for me. It doesn't always have to be my way. People don't always have to compromise with me. I need to get to a point where I'm humble enough to say, you know what, you take the lead. You go first. We can do things your way. I have to take a humble attitude when I approach people. You know, here's the thing, right? Because Paul says it all depends on you. And I probably shouldn't even say this, but I'm going to say it anyway because I got the mic. So, all right, so this is not even in the script, okay? So this is just parenthetically speaking. Because some of y'all are looking at me like, I ain't the problem, all right? So I understand that. If you got a problem with somebody, right? Maybe it's just not one person. Maybe it's a couple of people. All right, maybe it's not a couple of people. Maybe it's a few people. Maybe it's several people. All right, it's all of them. Okay? It's a lot of people. You know, sometimes you say everybody is getting on my nerves, right? You said that before. If you have a problem with a lot of people, that means that a lot of people have a problem with you. So if a lot of people have a problem with you, that means that you are the common denominator. All right, okay. So if you're the common denominator, maybe they're not the problem, maybe it starts with you. Maybe I don't need to be as worried about them fixing them. Maybe I need to fix myself. Maybe I don't need to be so worried about them getting their minds right. Maybe I need to get my mind right. Maybe I need to stop tripping off of what they did or they didn't do or what they should have done or what they shouldn't have said or what they should have said. Maybe I need to start paying more attention to the person that I look at every day in the mirror. It starts with me as far as it depends on you. All right, I like the way Paul says it in Philippians, right? Philippians, he gives us some more advice that goes along this same line in Philippians chapter 2. And he also compares us to the actions that Jesus had. Philippians chapter 2, verse 3, it says, don't be selfish. We need to say that again. Don't be selfish. Don't try to impress others. Be humble. Thinking of others is better than yourselves. Don't look out only for your own interests, but take an interest in others too. You must have the same attitude that Christ Jesus had. Though he was God, he did not think of equality with God as something to cling to. Instead, he gave up his divine privileges. He took the humble position of a slave and was born as a human being. When he appeared in human form, he humbled himself in obedience to God and died a criminal's death on a cross. In other words, Jesus said, you know what? Although I am God, although I deserve to be worshiped, although every knee should bow right now and every tongue should confess right now, I'm not going to focus on that. I'm going to take on a humble attitude. I'll be the servant now. I'll be the slave now. I'll be the lamb now. And I'll die for someone else's need. I won't focus on what I want, what I desire, what I need, what should be happening to me, what's best and right for me. I'm going to do what's best for everyone else. I'm going to put others first. Here's the crazy thing about God. God did nothing wrong. He doesn't lie. He doesn't cheat. He doesn't steal. He doesn't forget things. He's not flawed. And guess what? He was treated as someone who did all those things, who does all those things, right? We do that stuff, and we don't want to be treated like that, do we? We flaw, we forget things, we upset people, we speak out of the side of our neck sometimes, we do crazy stuff, but yet we take on this attitude that I shouldn't be treated this way. I'm better than that. I'm not, I ain't supposed to be like this. We got to humble ourselves. So here's how you apply this thing. This is what I want you to do. This is your first step. If you're going to deal with difficult people appropriately, you got to first take a humble attitude. Here's the first thing you must do, all right? Because you're going to see a person or the person that, you kind of don't get along with real well again. In fact, you're going to get in the car with them today. No, I'm just joking. You know, in fact, if you chose your spouse, right, and your spouse asks you later on to say, who did you choose on the poll, right? All right. And, we're going to want to be honest because it's Sunday, right? So this is what you say. All right. You say, I said my spouse, but here is why. You got to use some scripture, right? You're going to have to use some scripture to get past this, all right? This is what I want you to say. You can say, I chose my spouse, but here's the thing. I felt this prompting to do, what Proverbs 25, 24 says. It says, better to live alone in a tumble-down shack than share a mansion with a nagging spouse. Right? Well, all right. So y'all didn't find that nearly as funny as I thought it was going to be. All right. But so anyway, co-workers. Dang, spouses like neck and neck. It wasn't like this at the other two services. Wow, I feel strong, real strong right in this side over here. All right, so 27%. So that means you're going to see the person again, right? So tomorrow morning when you get to work, you're going to see the person, all right? And or tonight for the other 25% of you, all right? So when you see the person and they do that thing that annoys you, this is what I want you to do. This is your takeaway. You take a deep breath and say, I got to humble myself if I'm going to deal with this the right way. All I want you to do is take a deep breath and say, okay, I got to humble myself if I'm going to deal with this the right way. In fact, if you can't remember that, put it in your phone, put it on your screensaver, turn around and say, hold on 1 second, and scroll through your phone, look at your notes, and then say it to yourself. I got to humble myself if I'm going to deal with this the right way. Yep, you got to do this. In fact, don't even wait till the person does something that annoys you. As soon as you see him, just, I got to humble myself if I'm going to deal with this in the right way. You got to take a humble attitude. You got to force yourself into a humble attitude. If you don't, you're going to respond the same way that you've always been responding, and it's going to continue to cause pain. I learned a lot about how women give birth over the past year. My wife had a baby. She's 6 months now. In this process, you as a parent, you're new at this thing. You begin studying stuff because you want to make sure everything's right. And so I came across some information and I learned this, and I never knew it before. I guess I never had a reason to know. But did you know, you probably knew it because you're a lot smarter than I am, but did you know that babies have to come out head first? Right? I didn't know. To me, it makes more sense to come out feet first. I want to slide about it, you know what I'm saying? But I didn't know. So, babies got to come out head first. I guess I'm the only one, right? So anyway, some of y'all just faking like y'all don't know. All right, so babies got to come out here. And here's the thing, right? If the head on the baby isn't pointing down and it's pointing up, it's called a breech birth, right? Y'all heard? All right, okay. Thought I was going to teach y'all something new, okay? And so here's the thing. When it's a breech birth, it either comes out feet or butt first, right? I thought that was wise, so I know. So check this out. So there's a lot of complications with breech births, right? In fact, on most cases, they try not to have a vaginal delivery with a breech birth. They do a C-section, right? Because there's so many complications. They say that if a mother delivers a baby that's breached, she can go through prolonged periods of pain. It makes the delivery process longer. And I didn't know this. I talked to a maternal nurse earlier before the service, and I was just trying to get more information to make sure I was right. She said that the baby's head could get stuck in the mother because the head is the biggest part of the body, and that all the blood could be rushing to the head and cause brain damage. I didn't know that. That was new to me. And so that's why the baby has to come out head first, because it's the biggest part, and everything else can just slide out. See, I thought it was the other way around. All right, so here's the thing. The baby's head is up, causes more pain, causes complications, causes brain damage. But if the head is down, everything goes the right way. Here's the thing, because you're going to fail this part of the class. When we approach every situation in life, head up, head strong, Like we got it all together. Like we understand everything. Like everything is the way we supposed to be because that's the way we thought it should be. And that's the way we want people to respond to us. And when we're headstrong dealing with difficult people, guess what? We only cause prolonged pain. But we have to put ourselves in a position where we can humble ourselves enough to go head first. And when our heads are down and we can humble ourselves under God's mighty hand to let him deal with the people that we associate with. Because a humble attitude precedes an appropriate response. Let's pray. God, thank you so much for this message. Thank you for this service. God, I thank you for our experiences because they do nothing but make us stronger. And I pray that this week you will give us the strength that's required to approach the difficult people that we encounter with a humble attitude. I can only imagine how difficult it is for people and how the situations vary so much. But God, help us to understand that if we're going to respond to people that are difficult to deal with in the most appropriate way, we got to first humble ourselves. Thank you for what you're going to do. It's in Jesus' name we pray.